I recently heard a really great analogy about goal setting from Dr. Andy Galpin, who's a professor of kinesiology at Cal State Fullerton. And it goes a little something like this. Imagine you're in an unfamiliar location and you need to get to a grocery store. However, you don't know where a grocery store is or a route to get there. So you hop in your car and you just start driving, randomly trying to find a grocery store. You make turns until you hopefully eventually come across a grocery store, which you probably would because they're pretty prolific and all roads lead to a grocery store, right? But is that the most optimal way to find a grocery store? No, of course not. The most optimal direct route would be to look up the location of a grocery store, map the route from where you are to where that grocery store is, and follow that path, right? The same thing goes for goal setting. And I often do this where I maybe have an unclear goal in mind, but I have this really great plan or path to get somewhere, right? I have this system and it's really exciting. We'll talk a little bit more about systems for goals later, but that's not really effective if we do not have a destination in mind. Likewise, if we have a destination, but we do not have a tool for getting to that destination, then we are directionless, right? We just sort of wander and try things until hopefully something sticks and we reach a goal. You probably will eventually, trial and error. But I can tell you from experience, it's not the most fun or the most optimal way to get there. So let's bring this to what we're talking about today. Specifically, with relation to this podcast and who you are as a service leader, we want to talk about goal setting in a sustainable manner, meaning that we want to avoid burning out, overwhelm, running out of resources, or having an inefficient route to get to our goals. We want to be able to fix burnout through the alignment of our goals. So we're going to talk about 3 areas today in order to do that. The first thing that we're going to learn today is determining that optimal route to your goal or goals. And we've talked a little bit about this in a previous episode, but we're going to dig into it a little more. The second thing that we're going to talk about is understanding if your goals are aligned with your wellness needs. This is a really important part that I think we often skip over because it's not fun. It's not sexy to talk about our needs. It's a lot more fun to talk about goals, right? Like, I want to make $1 million. I want to be a millionaire. Like, that's exciting. That's something that it's like, that's cool. But to talk about, what my needs and perhaps, where I'm, have to kind of set boundaries in place. That's not fun to talk about, but it's so necessary. So, we're going to dig into this step, and I would encourage you not to skip over it. The third thing that we're going to talk about today is identifying any potential roadblocks, or as Dr. Galpin puts it, the defender that will stop you from reaching your goals. So determining the optimal route, understanding if your goals are aligned with your needs, and then identifying those roadblocks that'll stop you from reaching your goals. Why is this important? Major goal setting without considering your wellness needs, it's not sustainable. you must know your abilities and your limitations. Plus, you have to consider the X factors that life will invariably present to you in order to truly reach your goals in a sustainable, healthful way. So you need to know your abilities, your limitations, and the potential pitfalls that life will throw at you along the way. So let's dig into this first topic. The optimization of a route to your goals. Now, this is actually the third episode about goal setting that I've created. I didn't intend to do that, but as I've dug deeper into it, I've uncovered things, and it's just become necessary to now have this third episode about goal setting. Perhaps I did not plan my route in the most optimal way, but here we are. I'm learning too, folks. So in the first episode about goal setting, we talked about this idea of the marathon mindset, creating goals that have your lifeline in mind, your values, what your legacy is, what you want to leave behind for, your family, for the next generation, and really doing that work necessary to making sure that your goals are truly aligned with your heart. If you have not listened to that episode, I would encourage you to go back, and it's really a focus and mindset, and putting yourself in the mental space to be able to create goals in a way that really truly resonates with you. This last episode on goal setting, we dig into smarter goal setting. And SMARTER is an acronym. It stands for specific. The M is measurable. A is attainable or actionable. R is relevant or realistic. T stands for time. Goals have to have a very specific timeline. Otherwise, we do not have the motivation. So we talk about these lifelong goals, but we have to assign timelines to that, or else it's too ambiguous, right? The T, or rather the E, smarter, is for evaluate. So we need to be able to evaluate those goals. That's in a specific measurable way. And R is for readjust. Readjust for those things that inevitably will come up in life. So if you haven't listened to that episode on goal setting, I would encourage you to go and listen to that one as you're going through this process of goal setting. When we go through, you'll can look at it as a funnel. We're first starting out with these big ideas, these lofty goals. Then we're getting more specific with it. Now, in this episode, we're really digging into that idea of what's actually possible. What is possible for you, given your abilities, given your limitations, and being honest about that. This is not a place for ego. And let me tell you, this is not like a fun process necessarily. Goal setting that's fun is like, hey, I want to be a tech startup billionaire. And I want to have that Land Rover Defender, that classic Land Rover Defender that I've always wanted, with those inward facing seats in the back, those bench seats and the skylights. And I want it to have, a little lift on it. And I just want to be able to take it off-roading. It's all, I would love to have that vehicle. It's a very specific goal. And that's a fun goal for me to think about and to talk about. for me to bring reality to that and say, well, what does that look like financially? Can I afford that vehicle? Can I afford the maintenance on that vehicle? Does my lifestyle as an entrepreneur, as a new dad, support having a vehicle like that? Does it make sense for me? Does it make sense for the environment, right? To get an old school vehicle with, not great emissions? Is that a responsible thing to do? I don't know. When we start to really dig down into understanding if our goals are aligned with our needs, especially when it comes to wellness, which can include financial wellness, then it's not as exciting, right? I would really encourage you, despite it not being fun, to go through this process. Go through that process of really determining if those lofty lifelong goals that you have are in fact possible, reasonable. Then look at those optimal routes to get there. Use that SMARTER goal acronym and dig into those specifics. And by the way, there's a resource that I linked in the last episode that gets you really a workbook into goal setting. So please check that out. Now we have to ask ourselves, what's the intersection of goals and needs? I want to point out here that multiple goals are going to necessitate a bigger strategy. And something to point out, the more goals that we have, or the more complex goals that we have, the more challenging they're going to be to accomplish. So having one specific goal with a very clear timeline, set of parameters, understanding each specific step is going to be a lot easier to accomplish than very complex goals, right? So if I want to be a tech startup billionaire, well, there's a lot that goes into that, right? It's not just happenstance. It's not just luck. To accomplish a goal like that, I mean, there are many, many steps in between, right? But what I want to talk about is whether or not a goal like being a tech startup billionaire is really truly aligned with your wellness needs. So how do we determine what our needs are? Well, I've created conveniently a system called the 5 Bridges, which is a wellness plan that helps you really understand your lifelong strategy for your needs, and it evolves and changes as you do. So the 5 Bridges is a pretty simple construct. It's really a framework to help you understand your needs. This is, of course, not the only system out there. There are lots of different systems, but I'm going to use 5 Bridges for an example of determining needs. So the first bridge, actually, before we get into the bridges themselves, we do a little bit of pre-work, what we call clarity. Understanding truly what our needs are, from the sense of, what we want our lives to feel like. Well, that's not really quantifiable, but it's necessary to kind of build that picture of, the way that we want our lives to feel. So if we say, I want to have a long, healthy life. I want to be able to grow old and to do so in a healthful way, to have energy, to have my mental faculties, to be able to stay active. That's a goal, right? That's something that I can see very clearly what that maybe looks like in my mind, but how do I quantify that? Well, when we start to drill down into it, you can say, well, that means that if I trip and stumble, I can catch myself, right? I have enough strength, I have enough agility to be able to not fall down and break bones. I have enough energy to be able to, stay awake for a full day, or to be able to, go to dinner, or, hold a conversation, play a game of backgammon, apparently, with people, and to have the energy to sustain that. I want to be able to remember things from my youth. I want to be able to remember the people around me. And once I understand those more specific goals, then I can start to put in place practices and protocols that will keep me agile at a sustained energy level and keep me mentally sharp and focused. Great. So you're starting to see, some of this pre-work for understanding your wellness needs and your goals related to them. So now we can talk about the 5 bridges. So the first bridge is bond, and bond is how you connect to the people, places, and things that provide some type of support to you, i.e. your sources of strength. So bond is both a noun and a verb. It is both what we connect to and how we connect to those things that support us. Notice I'm not talking about only people. I'm also talking about places, talking about things, which can be animate or inanimate objects, like, a dog. We can bond to, a space. It can be a home. It can be nature. It can be a church. We can bond to words, to sacred text, to objects that are meaningful or hold some sort of a value for us. So bonds can really mean a lot of different things. And in the process of the 5 bridges, we determine how to bond in a healthy way by creating boundaries, managing expectations in relationships, understanding, our needs versus the needs of who or what we're bonded to. And it's a lot of really fantastic work in just developing relationships with ourselves and with others. So how this relates to this idea of goal setting and avoiding burnout, a quick example is if I have a goal related to my professional work and I am working in a, toxic environment, or maybe it's not toxic. Maybe it doesn't have to be that extreme. Maybe it's just an environment that is not supportive of my well-being as I would like. I don't have the time or space to, de-stress, to take care of myself. Perhaps that environment is not conducive to whatever goals I'm setting, right? Understanding how your support systems, how having, accountability can impact your goals is really important. The relationships in our life can really set us back if they are not in alignment with who we are, and can even prevent us. So that's, one of those roadblocks that I'm talking about. And the way that we bond and what we bond to can either help or hinder us. The second bridge is fuel. And fuel is anything and everything that goes into your system. So, of course, this includes food, beverages, supplements, things of that nature. But we also include anything that can come into your system through any of the five senses. So that could be things that we see visually, things that we hear auditorily, things that we breathe into our system, skin contact or things that we absorb through our skin. All of this is a form of fuel, right? Fuel we define as something that has a reaction inside of our system, right? So we see something violent on TV, and perhaps it stays in your mind. It gives you nightmares, or in a worst case scenario, it's something that we act out later on, right? That's a form of fuel. Having negative conversations that include gossip or some sort of toxicity, that's a form of fuel. Understanding how every form of fuel that comes into our system, affects our ability to function optimally, is a really important piece of wellness. In the 5 bridges, we dig deep into this idea of fuel, not only determining what our current fuel list is, but what do we want it to look like? What shifts do we need to make in our fuels in order to feel the best that we can absolutely feel in our lives? Well, how does this impact goal setting? Well, of course, if you're not feeling optimized, if you're not feeling energetic, if you are dragged down by drama and negativity, then how able are you to focus on your goals? Not very, right? So understanding if your wellness is really in a place to support your goals, but likewise, is your goal going to be detrimental to your wellness in some way? So take the tech billionaire example. If I am, just hustling to make money, and I'm eating, fast food all the time because I don't, make time to have proper meals, then perhaps that lifestyle of being a tech billionaire is not supporting my overall wellness. The third bridge is move. And move is what you do with your body, your kinesthetic output. So of course this includes physical fitness, mobility, stretching, things of that nature. But we go deeper and we include both the autonomous and semi-autonomous movements that happen in our body all the time. Breath work, things like digestion, our circulatory system, the electrical impulses that are going through our body all the time through our neurological system, blinking. All of these things are happening. They're forms of movement that happen in our body all the time. And of course, some of them we can control directly. Some of them we control or we impact indirectly, right? So movement, I can choose to move. I can choose to walk or to run or to exercise and to take care of my body in that way, to increase endurance, to increase strength. And some of the movements that happen in our body are determined by that external movement that we choose to do, but also by the fuel that we put in our system. Right? Because if I'm fueling my body in a way that gives me energy, then what's happening in my body? If I'm fueling with things that help my system, keep my cholesterol levels down and keep my heart healthy, then that fuel impacts that form of movement. Digestion. We all know how having a stomach ache or something of that nature can really impact our ability to focus or to work on a specific goal. So movement is very far-reaching, and we really look at movement in a holistic way, and of course how it's connected to the other bridges. This feeds right into this idea that if our goals are set that inhibit us from having movement in a sustainable way in our lives, then perhaps that goal needs to be adjusted, right? So if I'm that tech startup billionaire or aspiring one, then is that lifestyle going to let me move my body in a healthful way where I can maintain that agility, that stamina, that mental presence that I want to when I'm older? You see how the intersectionality of these start to become kind of complex, but we have to have these checks and balances in place. Now let's move on to the fourth bridge, which is rest. So naturally, after movement comes rest. Rest, of course, includes our sleep hygiene, but we go deeper than that to look at many forms of rest, including things like stillness, mindfulness, meditation, or longer forms of rest, like retreat or sabbatical. Understanding if our goals are going to allow us to, or interfere with the rest that we need. Not just our ability to get, the rest that we need at night, but our ability to take breaks and rest throughout the day as well, or through the week, or, can we take that time to really unplug on a regular basis, whether that's monthly, quarterly, annually, to really get a fresh start and a new perspective. The fifth and final bridge is give, and give is your positive output. This is how we energetically contribute back to the world, to the universe that is supporting us in so many ways. Give is the highest form of wellness. And you'll notice that it comes last in this list because we build ourselves up through our bonds, through fueling, through moving, through rest, so that we are able to give in a sustainable way. And oftentimes this is interlinked with our lifelong goals and our values as well. So if a goal that we have does not allow us to give in a sustainable way, then perhaps there's something we need to adjust there as well. Now, of course, like I said, 5 Bridges is just one construct, just one set of wellness protocols, but having some type of measure for your wellness, being able to quantify that so you can really look at your goal and compare it to each element of your wellness plan or program or approach. And if you don't have one, I would encourage you to find one because randomly, just like the grocery store analogy, randomly trying to hit a moving target of wellness is not really going to get you there. You might get it right some of the time, but having a clear goal of wellness and understanding how that's aligned with the other goals that you have in your life, that's where we truly, I think, find sustainability and can live that optimized life. And hey, don't fret if you don't have a system or you don't know how to determine one. There are resources. I'll leave them in the show notes here where you can find something that works for you. All right, so let's move on to this third and final takeaway for this episode, which is identifying the roadblocks that will stop you from reaching your goals, both wellness and other goals in life. So let's just first, throw out some ideas of these roadblocks or defenders that will keep you from reaching your goals or goal. One big one, I think that a bucket of roadblocks would be time management. Oftentimes, I think especially people who are service leaders who want to, do a lot and accomplish a lot, take on too much. I know I do. And not being able to fully, fulfill everything on our agenda or everything on our goals list is a real problem. And it's not just this sense of like, oh, hey, I made a goal, but I didn't reach it, and what impact that has on our sense of self or self-esteem. But it also has real world effects on those that we work with, and those who we're accountable to. I've learned this lesson in a really hard way, by overcommitting and under-delivering, and it's led to disappointment, and it's led to people feeling like, on my team specifically, like they're not appreciated, or like I don't value the work that they're doing. And it's been a hard lesson to learn. And I by no means have mastered it or fixed it. But just looking at my time management and really understanding what's reasonable. Dr. Galpin said something else in his conversation with Dr. Huberman on Huberman Lab podcast, which was oftentimes, when you set a goal, scale it back by 10%. I think high achievers especially anticipate what they can accomplish. So, set your goal and then scale it back by 10%. So when it comes to time, if you think that something's going to take you, 20 minutes to do, schedule 30 minutes, schedule 40 minutes even, to get that task accomplished. If, you have something that needs to be delivered in 6 weeks, can you, extend that by 8, or can you, give yourself a timeline that's more generous, or reduce the workload to actually fit into that timeline? So, another, roadblock that I think a lot of people, run into is lack of resources or access to resources. And this is, I think something to really take a look at. Do you actually have everything you need, or have access to everything that you need in order to accomplish your goals? And being an eternal optimist, I often, will say, well, I'll find that. I'll find access to that resource. I will create that resource. I will make that. And I find myself often in positions where I'm stuck because I don't actually have what I need to take the next step. Had I scaled back a goal or scaled back a timeline and took the time to make sure that I had access to a resource or created a resource first, then when I got to the step where I needed that, well, I wouldn't have hit a roadblock. So this goes back to our goal planning, those smarter goals, and making sure that we truly understand every step, right? If we have a goal in mind, we need to reverse engineer it to where we are today. If there's a step that we try to skip over, stop, go back and really focus back in on every little micro step along the way. I know it's not fun, but it's just so necessary. Another roadblock that I think pops up for people is related to accountability or community. Not having a person or people that you have some sort of obligation to, and maybe that's not in the sense of like, I have a deliverable at work that someone else is depending on, but maybe that's just a group of people that you care about or respect, and you have empowered them to keep you accountable. I think mastermind groups are great for this. Really just, having people who are like-minded, who've got your back and keep you, moving forward towards a goal. Accountability, for me is huge, especially as, an entrepreneur and someone who, doesn't have community outside of community that I create. I need to seek out people who aren't on my team, my peers, i.e. that can I can be accountable to. Another roadblock that I think pops up a lot is motivation. And I think this goes back to that marathon mindset, goal setting from a couple of episodes ago, and making sure that your goals are really aligned with your values, that there is a very large carrot at the end of the stick that is keeping you motivated towards a goal. The psychology behind goal setting, of course it needs to be aligned with your values, but then, setting intermediary goals and having, built-in rewards, getting that dopamine hit, measuring and, reassessing and evaluating, all of these steps help keep us motivated. So making sure that you have the proper motivation in place to reach a goal, because if it's not truly something that matters to you, and it's a lot of work, what's the likelihood of you actually following through with it? Maybe less than you might like, right? So, really, I think taking a look at those roadblocks and being honest about them. This includes your limitations. Understanding, who you are, where you live, what financial resources you have, what your physical health is, what your cognitive ability is. All of these things factor into whether or not you're going to be able to reasonably accomplish a goal, and determining those roadblocks. Now, nothing that I'm talking about here has to mean that your goal is not possible or not achievable. All I'm suggesting is that once you identify a roadblock or a potential roadblock, that is an opportunity to determine a detour, a way to get around that roadblock. And that may mean enlisting the help of someone else. That may be learning a new skill set. That may be, pausing and shoring up resources. There's lots of ways to find a detour around a roadblock. But you got to identify those roadblocks in order to, creatively understand how to circumvent them, right? All right. So, we'll end there today, but just to recap what we've talked about, first step in this process is to really determine the optimal route to your goals. And that goes back to those smarter goals. Take a look at that resource and really understand, that optimal route. Don't skip steps along the way. Then the second thing is understanding if your goals are truly aligned with your wellness needs and, what's sustainable for you and your needs as just a human being. The third thing is identifying the roadblocks that will stop you from reaching your goals. Folks, if it feels like a lot, if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's okay. It's normal. Take a step back, take a breath, and just focus on one goal at a time. If you want extra support with this process, please reach out to me, to my team. We have 5 Bridges guides who can help you through the process of goal setting, of really understanding your wellness needs, and where the intersection of those exists. We'll leave a link in the show notes for you to reach out and to connect in case that's something that might be helpful for you. If I could, just before I let you go, I would love to ask you to hop over to YouTube, youtube.com/Jacob Moore, and subscribe to this show. That is a zero-cost way of helping support my work and the work of my team. By doing that, you help allow us to continue to do this show, which is funded really out of my own budget, and having supplemental support sources of support for that is really helpful, and YouTube is a vehicle for that. So I would appreciate you subscribing. Please comment, read all the comments. And as you're able, share and rate as well. Well, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. And until next time, be well.